Use the gavel here. I'll officially call to order the August 17th, 2022 meeting of the City of Falls Church Planning Commission to order. Can we please have a roll call? Mr. Trainer.
Here.
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 I'm here. Okay, great. We have a quorum and then some. First order of business is to adopt tonight's agenda. Seems fairly straightforward tonight. Several action items. If there's no edits, concerns, or revisions, look for a motion to adopt the agenda as it was published.
Move to adopt the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously. We will proceed with the agenda as published. There are no speakers for the speaker series tonight. Mr. Trainer, are there any petitions we have received for items not on the agenda? Okay, just checking. So moving right along, that brings us to our action items, item 6A, and I will read the title since this is a public hearing. So this is item 6A. We're going to hold a public hearing on site plan application number 2020-0877 for a mixed-use development project on approximately 2.09 acres of land located at 1001 and 1003 West Broad Street. Real property code numbers 52-102-065 and 52-102-060. An application by Mill Creek Residential Trust LLC. And we're concurrently also hearing subdivision application number 2020-0877 to consolidate two lots into one lot located at 1001 and 1003 West Broad Street. Also, real property code numbers 52-102-065 and 52-102-060 on application by Mill Creek Residential Trust LLC. Okay, and so with that, I think we will start off with a staff presentation or summary of the items that are before us for action tonight. Mr.
Yes.
Holler, or is it Mr. Stoddard?
Oh, thank you, Chair, and members of the Commission. I'll just briefly introduce the item before turning it over to our case planner on the project, Jeff Hollern. Just to frame this is before you for final action, for public hearing and final consideration tonight. This is, as you mentioned, a site plan application for the Founders Row 2 mixed-use application. This site plan application is the technical follow-up to the special exception application that Council had previously approved. We note that in the staff report there. Council had approved the special exception in March of 2022. Planning Commission has seen these materials before in multiple work sessions, including most recently your August 3rd work session. As Jeff has done already in this staff report, he's highlighted changes to the materials in gray, and the staff recommendation tonight is approval of the proposed motion. But with that, I'll turn it over to our case planner, Jeff Hollern.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Planning Commissioners. It's good to see you. This is my first in-person, meeting in a long time, so it's good to see everybody. I'm Jeff Hollern with the planning staff. So tonight, the Planning Commission is requested to hold a public hearing to take action on the second submission of a site plan and subdivision consolidation application for the proposed Founders Row 2 mixed-use development. This application follows the approved special exception that was approved by Council March 28th, 2022. As Paul had mentioned, the materials that you've received tonight are generally the same as what you received during the August 3rd work session. However, we have added key sheets that we have received from the applicant on August 10th, referenced throughout this report as submittal 2.1 to the list of the attachments. Again, changes to the staff report are highlighted in gray. So staff is recommending the approval of the proposed motion at the beginning of the staff report, but we have identified several items to be included as conditions of approval, which can be addressed administratively as part of a resubmittal of the application materials. First, we have for stormwater runoff, information has been requested to make sure that the project meets requirements of VC number 10V, which is that there is a stormwater runoff reduction of 20%. Future resubmission will be reviewed by Public Works staff to confirm that the project provides this reduction. As for transportation, staff is looking for a signal plan submittal, crosswalk signage at Ellison and West Street. Both of those items, by the way, have been submitted with this 2.1 submission. So we just have, as staff, we have not gone through and done a full review of those materials yet, but they have been received. Staff is also looking for the project to meet a sidewalk cross slope and not to exceed 2%. We are looking to ensure a 30 clearance for the bus shelter with WMATA approval. And we are also looking for minor changes to the bike share location placement in coordination with LIFT and city staff. The staff in AB have also recommended that portions of the Ellison Street and West Broad Street facades are given another look, a little more refinement, as well as the pedestrian space at the corner of West Broad Street and Northwest Street. So the Planning Commission held a second work session looking at this second submittal for the Founders Row 2 site plan on August 3rd. The table on line 50 of the staff report outlines comments received by the planning commissioners and any associated response since then. Let's see. Staff has received an updated resubmittal from the applicant on August 10th. We have not been able to complete a full review of those materials, but we have looked at it at a very high level. That submittal is meant only to be an interim submission to indicate progress made on addressing comments received. However, from a very high-level review of those materials, staff was able to clarify some project details and eliminate several items that were listed in the previous staff report as outstanding comments. Just a very brief overview again of the project. We're looking at a mixed-use building with a planned maximum height of 79.19 feet, comprised of 6 levels of residential multifamily rental apartments, 280 in total. Ground floor retail of 22,000 square feet, 5,000 square feet of dedicated co-working space, 414 spaces of underground parking. And again, the building height is 79 feet along West Broad Street and tapers down to 30 feet along Ellison Street. Let's see. And then I'll move further down line 221 in the staff report. As I mentioned before, most of the VCs have been addressed that we're looking for ahead of site plan approval. The only one outstanding is this VC 10V on the stormwater reduction, which will be confirmed after Public Works staff gets a chance to look at the revised materials. So that is about it for the staff report. We do have the applicant here to give a presentation, and there's also a few folks on the call as well to go over the project with you in more in depth.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Before we go over to the applicant, are there any questions from commissioners for staff? I would just ask a quick question of Mr. Holland. I mean, I know that you keep on mentioning that there's additional staff review that's needed, and it was submitted, without time to complete that. I mean, how much more time does staff need to complete the stormwater review specifically, in addition to some of the other items you mentioned?
So we do like to give, for all of our submissions, we do like to give them a 2-week review period. And that should be enough time for them to go over what's been submitted. Like I said, I was able to look at the August 10th submittal at a very high level and see that they've been able to knock off a few of our comments from the last staff report. But we are now expecting, I've discussed this with Joe as well, we are looking for, after action, we are looking for a submittal 3, which would be a full resubmittal of all the materials, and we will distribute that to Public Works staff. They will have a chance to take their 2 weeks, take their time, and make sure that these conditions are met.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Teets.
I was just wondering, when did you guys receive submittal 2.1?
I guess a week ago today.
So it's, you haven't had your normal 2 weeks to look at it.
Right.
So that's really what the issue is.
And as I had mentioned in the work session as well, a lot of the things that we had listed in the recommendation section were very minor things that we were looking for. Just we wanted, it could have even been a note on some of the plan sheets. And so because of this resubmittal, we were just able to look for those notes and say, okay, it's noted, it's there, or it was pointed out to us. So the stormwater one is the only one that would require a little bit more in-depth review.
I do just want to clarify for the commission, 2 weeks is correct. That's our internal technical review time. In terms of the time from getting materials to getting them into a public packet, that's typically a month. The additional time on either side is for application intake, coordination of comments, as well as appropriate posting and advertising of the meeting. So it's 2 weeks of technical review turns into approximately 1 month of calendar time.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm sure we may have more questions on that point later on. But I guess for now, if there are no other questions for staff at this, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Stevens.
I have a question regarding the sidewalk improvement voluntary concession from the chart that's shown there. I actually raised this several times in previous meetings about the possibility of using the $100,000 that is being provided for sidewalk improvement to improve that stretch of sidewalk from the project to the WNOD, which today is a very narrow sidewalk. And we're hoping to stimulate a lot more bicycle and pedestrian usage to the WNOD, and so that sidewalk right now is not conducive to that. The response that came back from the staff is a little confusing. It doesn't really say anything. I'm just curious whether you can add any specification to that. I mean, what's the process for approving how this $100,000 is going to get used? Is there any possibility of us giving some preliminary approval to using it for improving that sidewalk stretch that I mentioned? Or is this just kind of there for some non-specified future decision?
Sure. We did reach out just today. We did reach out today to Public Works Director Zach Bradley about this. And Paul, I don't know if you want to chime in with his response to that.
So this, the VC was, the voluntary concession, sorry, the language in that voluntary concession was written intentionally, one, to make sure that there was a clear nexus to the project in terms of the 1,000-foot radius, and then number two, to attach it to the city's Missing Link Sidewalks program, that's something that's run annually out of the operating budget. It's on a bit of a stall this cycle, just due to staffing reasons. We're in the process of hiring a new transportation engineer. When they come back on board, obviously Missing Links as well as other programs will get rolling again, get walking again. And so I think if the commission, I guess what I would advise the commission, because I think I've heard you all say that multiple times, this idea of better connecting the project to the WNOD. So I think it's already a cash contribution that the applicant's making to the city, so I think here it would be a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the city manager, Public Works Director, city staff generally, that stretch of Broad Street be considered in the Missing Links program in the next iteration.
Well, that's certainly better. I think that's a better approach. I mean, I wasn't aware of any other sidewalk stretches within that 1,000-foot radius that, I mean, since they're all going to be rebuilt, or at least the ones around the project. So it really doesn't leave much else. So I was kind of hoping that this would be one that we could kind of say, yeah, that's what we should do. So anyway, you've made a recommendation, and hopefully we can incorporate that into our resolution. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. If there's nothing else from commissioners at this point in time, I guess we will hear from Mr. Muffler.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Planning Commissioners, for having us here tonight. It's great to see you all in person. We appreciate you taking the time out of your end of summer to join us here for this public hearing. My presentation tonight will be brief. It's going to touch on very specifically the items that Mr. Holland just brought up in the staff report. I would like to just speak in terms of the process here and the way we've approached this is that the 2.1 submission was intended to be a truly interim submission, not for full review, but to display the progress that has been made based on feedback from the 8-3 work session. So clearly, based on timing, we went 8-3 with work session, interim submission, have this hearing, and then following this hearing, and this was similar to Founders 1, I can't speak on other projects as well, there is a final submission post-approval to wrap up any loose ends. To Mr. Holland's point, many of the items that are outstanding are very technical in nature, based on staff approval. We will walk through them here tonight to provide an understanding. I believe, in my personal opinion, I feel very confident, I'm joined by my team here as well, that can speak to it more technically, that we meet all of the requirements. I would say that to things like stormwater, which again, I am 100% confident we meet that stormwater requirement. If for some reason we did not, it is a voluntary concession we would not be able to advance without then redesign, reconfiguring to work that through. So ultimately, that special exception voluntary concessions do hold supreme. Jack, if you don't mind scrolling down to the next slides. Again, I do not plan on touching on many of the bigger picture or kind of the macro items because we've covered those ad nauseum, and I really do want to just touch on the things that have changed from submission 1 to submission 2, which is what you're evaluating, along with the items that have changed from our work session, along with the staff comments. So you have seen this slide in our last presentation, that this submission 2 does request a modification to parking reductions. We do have improvements to signage and striping that was requested. There was revised Founders Plaza access, wider passageways, reverse staircases. There is a protected and accessible bike share station that's been located, that's been confirmed by city staff to meet the proper sun direction. We do have improved architectural feedback. Again, these are renderings that you saw in your last work session. We did include a LEED scorecard to demonstrate that we're meeting the LEED Gold requirements and energy reduction requirements. Next slide, please. So these are directly addressing comments from last work session. We have confirmed that we are providing a conduit to the bus shelter for power. We have, since the genesis of this project, been requested to put native plantings along Ellison Street. I've maintained that the aesthetics of Ellison Street are also incredibly important to maintain those front lawns to integrate with the residential. We feel that we've been able to compromise and find a hybrid of incorporating the native plantings along with the turf grass. Very much a win-win, and we'll show that as an exhibit. We have included additional pedestrian safety measures. We heard it loud and clear, as we have from transportation and from neighbors, then ensuring that the ingress and egress from those garages is safe. We'll show those in exhibits as well. We have provided, and I believe it was in your package, responses to all staff comments, all voluntary concessions illustrating where things outstand to kind of clean up those loose ends. Next slide, please. So these next slides are direct responses to what Jeff had mentioned, and to his credit, he has clarified that a lot of these have been cleared up as well, but I do just want to be direct with this. Confirmation of the 20% stormwater reduction. Again, I'm not sure why there is the outstanding issue. I can assure you that the hydrology calculations, the sizing of the vault, meet the requirement in the VC. I do have Karen and Phil from Walter Phillips here who can speak to the technical engineering behind that, but I am confident that when Public Works does have the time to dig into the calculations, they will confirm that as well. Signal plan submittal, we had long work sessions with city staff. That has been submitted. Crosswalk signage plan, that's in the latest submission as well. It is also as an exhibit later on in here. Cross slopes not exceeding 2%. Between the building zone and the pedestrian zone on Broad, we have a max of 1.8% of a cross slope. Safety measures I mentioned is an exhibit later. The acceptance of WMATA bus stop, that permanent location has been confirmed by WMATA. Refinement of the bike share, as you can see, we've added striping to direct traffic around the bike share station to ensure, again, that the location works, the access works, safety works. We have refined that as well. Next slide, please. We have maximized the entrance to Founders Plaza on both the north and the south ends to ensure that they are maximized while maintaining the required 10-foot clear of the pedestrian zone. This includes both the ramp up and the stairs. The Ellison Broad facades, you all saw those in your last work session, but they have been improved based on feedback from the AAB. The Broad and West corner, again, you saw this as well, but plantings have been included to add to the streetscape. So as they do not interfere with the retail entrance, but then on our site, what we can control, we've maximized green area there. And then lastly, addressing staff comments, as I've mentioned, I believe was in your package, we have responded to all outstanding staff comments. Next slide, please. So again, these are just exhibits to kind of supplement what I just went through. This is the overall illustrative site plan, as you all have seen before. Next slide, please. So in terms of public spaces, you can see the bike share station in terms of how we are planning on locating this adjacent a curb with bollards and striping around it to direct traffic around that. You can see on the Founders Plaza entrance, the dash line is our property line, so we have maximized that while maintaining the 10-foot or the 9-foot pedestrian clear. Same with the staircase as well; that has been widened as well. Next slide, please. Again, this is the big change, right? We have been requested to include these native plantings, and as you can see, we have included native plantings along with turf so that you have plantings. You also have the front lawns, right, so that this looks like a residential environment instead of overgrown, or not overgrown, but just bushes throughout. I think that this meets the aesthetic along with environmental objectives as well, so we hope that this is a solid concession win-win for the design, for the use, and for the environment. Next slide, please. Signage and striping is throughout the site. This includes the flashing speed limit signs on West Street, along with crosswalk signage and striping along West and Ellison Street to ensure pedestrian safety. Next slide, please. The next two slides are illustrative of means and methods for ensuring pedestrian safety in and out of the garage. We have added speed humps exiting the garage to ensure the traffic slows down. We will have stop signs inside the garage to ensure that cars are understanding that there are pedestrians crossing. There are bollards in the pedestrian right-of-way to ensure that they can see something. There are mirrors that have been included so that cars can see if there are pedestrians coming. On Broad Street in particular, we also have don't block the box striping so that cars can make the left-hand turn out. And if you scroll down to the next slide, you'll see that it's effectively the same without the don't block the box signage for Southwest Street as well. So without installing stoplights at these garage entries, we do feel that this will be, this should be very conducive to a safe environment and ensure that pedestrian safety is met along these corridors. Next slide, please. So then my last few slides here, frankly, and you can scroll through these kind of just slowly. I actually just stop it for 1 second, sorry, just to preface this. As I conclude here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, those were the outstanding comments from the staff report that we went through. Those were the requests and questions from Planning Commission as of our last time here. We've been working collectively on this project for over a year now, really for almost 2 years now. And as these next few slides will illustrate, I've effectively got renderings of original architecture versus today architecture. Architecture is not the be-all, end-all. It's certainly important, but I do think what's indicative of is programming, design, planning, and a cooperative community process here that's merited itself in a far superior product than was brought to you over a year ago today. So if you continue to scroll through here, you may recall that this was a 300-plus unit, 7-story project that has now been reduced to a 280-unit, 6-story project. Architecture has been refined. You can just continue to scroll, Jack, through these. Architecture has been continued to refine. I mean, it's fairly stark as you go through here. Environmental and community benefits have been increased throughout the process, understanding that was preserved in the special exception. Throughout Planning Commission, we've been challenged to improve that architecture, to improve our environmental commitments. We've worked tirelessly with staff on transportation concerns, on ensuring that we're meeting our voluntary concession commitments, which again, I am very confident we are doing as of today. We have worked with neighbors, and I can't thank them enough throughout the process. We understand the development can be difficult for neighbors, not can be difficult, let me correct myself, is difficult for neighbors. And all we can do as developers is promise to be cooperative, to be good partners, and to be good neighbors in the process to deliver something that we do feel is superior to what is there today. As I conclude my remarks tonight, I do just want to say that I am thankful for all parties that have been involved with this throughout the process. Happy to answer any questions you might have, understanding that there are some staff cleanups that will need to occur in our final submission, but I can assure you that we have responded to those comments. I believe we are meeting our commitments, and we hope to be under construction on this, if all goes well, before the end of this year. So thank you for your time. I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Muffler. All right, Commissioner questions? Anyone want to lead off? I mean, yeah, Mr. Stevens, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of minor questions. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with where the project is coming. You mentioned the widening of the stairs from the plaza, and thanks for mentioning that. Do you happen to know how wide it's going to be?
I do not, and the person that would know that is Adam, who is unfortunately not able to make this tonight due to family commitments. I want to say it's approximately 6 feet wide, but
Okay.
but you can't hold me to that, so I do apologize for that.
All right. The other question I had has to do with I think you had agreed to provide 2 estimates of solar on the roof, just as an estimate. I'm just wondering if you had
So.
underway.
So I can't, so I could do that if you would like to see those. So we did, I do not recall the commitment. We will be doing solar. We did go out to 2 companies through our process to do
Yeah.
that. We are way down the line with one in terms of design, commitment, procurement, et cetera. So we will have solar on, I think we showed it as an exhibit on our last presentation. There is solar on the south side of the building, effectively that entire width of Ellison Street on the top of the building.
I think the Environmental Sustainability Council was interested in just seeing the estimates.
I'm happy to share that with them.
Yeah, so
Happy
I
to share that with you.
don't need to go through it tonight, but it's just something that was raised. It was kind of a novel way to take a step forward on trying to get more renewable energy on projects, and we were pleased that you had agreed to do that.
Sure.
So
Happy to share.
Just following up on that.
Happy
That's
to
all I
share.
had. Thanks.
Of course.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. I saw some other hands go up, but I don't know if anyone else. Commissioner Teets, I thought your hand would go up maybe halfway before.
Well, because I have a question, but I don't know if this is the right time for it. So if Ms. Coleman has a question that's more substantive. No, because I'm just wondering, if we were to choose not to continue this issue today, would that be much of a timeline issue? I am concerned about the large number of administrative things that are left, even though I understand that most of them seem like they're okay. I just don't feel like this feels like a final site plan with so much stuff left on the table, especially because the staff has listed building architecture refinement, and I think that that's something I'd like to see before we would approve something.
So in prior approvals, we have often had a list of conditions that are largely technical to complete. Most recently, with Broad and Washington on the architecture point, we did actually have 2 directions from the Planning Commission to address architecture administratively on the Broad and Washington project. One for the East Broad face and one for the North Washington face. And so I think staff prepared the motion thinking this would be similar in nature, that there would be some direction from the Planning Commission about specifically what you wanted to see, and then staff would carry that out.
Yeah, and I understand that. I guess it's just a sheer number of them. It's not like 1 or 2 things. It's a lot of different things listed here. And also, I'm also concerned about like crosswalk signage, signal plan. These are all really key things for a pedestrian-friendly area, and I don't know. I'm personally a little uncomfortable with how much is still left as something that would be dealt with later for this submission 3. I feel like submission 3 is the real final site plan, and we're kind of still not quite there. And that's just personal. So if we were to continue it, would that be a timeline problem? Just to allow staff, I guess it's really a month, because like you said, they need to get it in and do it. Is that a problem if we can get to 3 and actually have more of a final site plan?
I guess that's for the applicant, right?
Yeah.
It would prove to be problem. This has been a schedule that we've outlined for over 6 months now, and we've worked very hard to meet that. And land contracts and closings are kind of lined up based on this approval. I completely understand, and I completely understand where your head's at. Don't get me wrong. I can sit here and, with honesty, whether you believe it or not, tell you that these have been addressed, and it really is technical cleanup. But I completely understand shifting this a month would prove issues on my side. But that's from me.
Commissioner Hyra, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to underscore what Ms. Teets said. The precedent of a submission coming in and knowing you guys need 2 weeks, or you typically have 2 weeks to review, and then it coming before us, before that review is complete, it seems a little odd. And I would think that it sort of makes it feel like we're trying to rush, right? And we're not rushing. We've been doing this for a long time. Like, you guys have spent almost over 2 years planning, right? So this is not a rushed project by any means. But then why aren't we following the timelines in terms of submission, thorough review, then back to the commissions for approval? We're kind of speeding it up. For what purpose? That I'm just curious, like, why? Why didn't the staff sort of say to the applicant, give us 2 weeks, we'll review it, and then we'll get our approval, and then we'll go back to the planning commission or whatever other commissions or city council when you need to. Because then that sort of feels like, well, then the next one you're going to rush and you're going to say, oh, well, we have to do, there's deadlines, this, that. But if you have a process in place, why don't you stick to it? So what is it specifically about this particular project at this particular moment that you felt you needed to come back to us so soon when you already have your procedures in place?
So I don't know that I would say there was anything particular about this project that was causing us to bring it back for action. I think this is what we typically try to follow in terms of our procedures for an approved special exception, that we would see the site plan application, perform a full review on the first submission, make sure that it satisfies the VCs, go through a round of technical comments, get the second submission, review those, provide technical comments on those as well, bring it to the commission. And so certainly by the time we got second submission, we thought it was ready for commission's action, which is where we would hope to be with any project, and in this one we felt we were. The list of comments, things like striping plans and signal timing plans, and I'm mentioning those because they keep coming up. Those typically get set in the site plan, and then they often get adjusted in the field, and then they get adjusted after the project is occupied. So some of the things that we're flagging are things that are required to be in the site plan, and obviously we do a diligent review on those. But we also know that there are things that get flexed during construction and even post-construction.
Well, I mean, I think, for me, I mean, maybe, I know the stormwater issue, I think is significant, and I've heard what Mr. Muffler said. Maybe since we have your expert team here, could Walter Phillips walk us through the stormwater?
I believe Karen is in Outer Banks right now, but Karen, if you're able to
Well, just to-
opine, that would be great.
Just explain how you're going to meet the 20%.
Sure.
Staff
Karen.
flagged that as one of their, I think, the most, crucial deficiencies, so.
Karen, you there? Oh, can we not hear her? Hold on one second, Karen, we can't hear you. I don't know if she's on mute. We had this issue last week on council. Yeah. Hold on one second, Karen.
I can just barely hear it. Oh, it's coming out here.
Coming out of like his.
We can hear you on his laptop. We're trying to get you on the speakers. Say that again, Karen?
Hello,
Yeah,
can
there
you
you
hear
go.
me?
Yep. we're
Okay,
good.
great. Okay, well, I'll keep it brief. So how, for meeting stormwater in general, I know I'll go through the whole thing. I know we're kind of talking about the quantity right now, but as we mentioned before, because it all is related, from a stormwater, the package, I guess we're doing here is we have some green roof on some of the upper levels. We have the view you have right here, those townhouse type looking or 3-story roofs. Those fall down to those bioretention planters that run along the face of the building on Ellison. And then, but the rest of the larger roof, the larger multifamily building roof runs to a large vault, a stormwater management vault that is in the garage. It's actually under where the Founders Plaza is. So there's a very, very large vault, basically empty vault where this water will be stored, and we have an orifice structure to slowly release the water which goes on to West Street, goes through another BMP device, which is like a filtering device, and then outfalls into the system. So that's how we're meeting the 20%. I do believe we've been meeting the 20% the entire time. Some of the comments on the last review, you'll kind of note they wanted to make sure we specifically kind of said certain language in our response to make it clear that was more about the DEQ requirements. And I think their comments were, you need to meet the DEQ requirements, which we are, and they just kind of kept wanting to remind us that, remember, you need to meet this 20% VC in addition to the DEQ, which we are doing. And in that submission, the 2.1, we did, we submitted our calculation sheet, some hydrographs, and some other backup information in that submission that we just did last week. So we do feel that we are meeting the requirements.
Correct. Yeah, just to be clear, we've never received comments that we're not meeting it, more so clarifying comments on, as Karen was talking about, some DEQ requirements. And that has
Right.
not changed from our submission one, so.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other commissioner questions? Commissioner Comont, go ahead.
I have one. Well, thank you for including the native plantings at that corner. I think that will maybe even help with some of the stormwater. You didn't mention composting in the program, but I see in the notes here that you are committed to it as a company, which I hope it means that you will.
Compost crew and our
Excellent.
operations team had a call last week or next week, so
That's
yes, no,
great.
we are definitely looking into it.
Is it something you'd also consider for Founders Row 1?
Yeah, no, I mean, we consider it beyond that, right?
Yeah.
Communities in general in the area.
Terrific.
I'll be honest, I don't know the how of it all, but if we can figure out the how of it all, it's a great idea.
Great,
So that's
thank
what
you
we're
so
looking
much.
into. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay, any other commissioner questions? Maybe what we'll do before we deliberate further, this is a public hearing, so if there's anyone in the audience wishing to speak, I see one hand go up. Come on up, give us your name and your address before you start speaking, and then have at it. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Steve Delaney, and I live on Ellison Street, 913 Ellison Street, 924. My concern is that if you're going to build all these 6-story apartment buildings, I mean, not everyone wants to live in a community with just total block after block of 6-story apartment buildings. But if you're going to have apartment buildings block after block after block after block, at least you can do is leave some area open for like a 7-Eleven or something like that. Because what happens is like there's an apartment down at 4 Mile Run and Columbia Pike, and they have an indoor store. It's a huge apartment, 4 times apartment, but it can't stay in business because you have to have an outdoor parking lot and catch some of the drive-by business to stay in business. And so if you have a community that block after block after block after block of apartments, you don't even, there are no stores. The stores that are indoors, they don't get any business, and they go out of business, like on Columbia Pike and 4 Mile Run. You got to have a place for a 7-Eleven, because these stores inside don't catch that much business, stay in business. And nobody likes indoor parking because they think you have to pay for indoor parking. I mean, somewhere around here, if you're going to do this, you got to have a room for a 7-Eleven. A second thing real quick, I'm sorry to ask this, but on the intersection of West and Ellison, I talked to the town engineer years ago, and he agreed with me. The crosswalk should be the east side, not the west side. Nobody uses the east side because they come down Ellison, and the kids walk across on the east side of Ellison, crossing across West Street. So those are my 2 comments. I mean, if you guys want to do this, that's fine. But, I mean, I wouldn't do it forever, a block and block and block and block of apartment buildings, at least have a 7-Eleven. So, the store on Columbia Pike is indoor. It has 4 to 5 times apartments of Founders Row, and it goes out of business. You've got to catch drive-bys, like a 7-Eleven, to stay in business. So there's no stores there now. I wish them good luck. But, a mixed community is what I think. Thanks.
Thank you, thank you. Well, Mr. Muffer, maybe you could talk, just to respond, as far as the retail component of this project, and
Sure.
maybe while you're at it, you could update Founders Row 1 retail status, while you're talking about retail and the type of businesses that you're targeting for this project, but also maybe give an update on the other one as well.
No, and I apologize, sir, I didn't catch your name, but from the get-go, we've heard from our neighbors and from constituents that, having a use like a 7-Eleven, neighborhood serving retail is incredibly important. That's how we've pitched this retail, frankly, for 2 years now, sometimes to our own detriment, frankly, because neighborhood serving retail isn't maybe the sexiest use sometimes, right? But it is sometimes the most useful use. We have programmed this, at least in merchandising, right, to be neighborhood serving retail. So to include things, I mean, if we were able to find, perhaps not a 7-Eleven, the 7-Eleven, to this gentleman's point, does prefer surface parking. There are concepts, you all are getting a Wawa, so it wouldn't be a Wawa, but there are Mart-type concepts that we could integrate into this, and we would like to do so. I think that would be a phenomenal use. 7-Eleven, just to be clear, looked at this site once upon a time, but this site is so unique that it doesn't have the parking that it actually would allow to support it. The Rite Aid does, but the other store, the other side does not have the parking for a 7-Eleven. So I can assure you that we are going to do our best to program successful retail here. Very similar to Phase 1, one of the things you've heard me say over and over again is that we own the retail here. We do ourselves a massive disservice, both economically on the retail, but also just aesthetically, programmatically on the residential if that retail is unsuccessful. So our program here, and certainly on Phase 1, depend on the success of that retail. So from a parking, from a design, from a programming, we need to make sure that's successful. And I think that staff, council, you all have done a very good job of ensuring that the aesthetics, the commitments, the storefronts, the shafts, the clearances, all of that, the signage, right? All of that is committed to ensure that this is doubly successful from a retail perspective. With regards to Phase 1, we do think we'll have our first tenants, 3 of them, opening up here in the next 6 to 8 weeks, which is really exciting. That will include storefront, which I think all of you are very excited about, as am I. The Michelin star restaurant, Ellie Bird, is in the final stage. If they haven't gotten their permit yet, they're in the final stages of it, and they will begin construction shortly thereafter as well. We have a handful of other tenants that are working their way through the permitting process. So as I've said kind of for some time now, we're in it, right? Stores are under construction, getting ready to open, going through their permits, going through their design, and we're negotiating with additional tenants as well. In my presentation last week, I believe I said that there is only about 25% of the retail currently that we do not have some kind of either lease, construction, or letter of intent on. Of that 25%, half of that is the massive store that we had under contract but went bankrupt during the pandemic, and we've been looking to backfill. So I think we're making significant progress on that, and I don't know about you, but I'm very excited to have dinner at Founders Row, in the next 2 months. So, but trust me, we need this retail to be successful here.
Okay, thank you.
A comment
Commissioner, go ahead.
on that. Just on the retail, I mean, do you have a plan in place? I mean, the gentleman who just spoke kind of mentioned 7-Eleven, and some people would like that, some wouldn't. But I think we might all agree what we don't want are a bunch of blue tarps. And that's what we have at Founders Row 1 right now. And has there been any planning, knowing that it's going to be a volatile and difficult commercial market and retail market, that if this residential fills up quickly on Founders Row 2, what's sort of the plan? Have you thought through some flexibility and also just sort of backup plans to prevent the Founders Row 1 from replicating? Like, you're going to fill up Founders Row 1 eventually, but it may be even a more competitive environment by the time you get to Founders Row 2, because we have other developments going up. The market's going to change. So we might be even a worse situation. So then what?
Yeah.
And are there some lessons learned about how to do the commercial a little bit better in this difficult environment?
There's a book of lessons learned on how to do commercial here, but I'm not even going to speak about myself, but, staff and council, and I do believe there was a slide, probably when we brought this back earlier this summer, that spoke to storefront specifically, because that was a huge concern. I don't have the slide here, but long and short of it is there is a requirement in our voluntary concessions to ensure that all storefronts are in place before I think we even hit like 50% of our COs. And it's like segmented. And then, so there's that, like 100% of the storefronts have to be in before we have half of our occupancies, not occupied units, but just the certificates of occupancy. And then I believe that then beyond that, there are holdbacks from residential COs. Again, can't remember the numbers. It's in the VCs, so it's preserved. But say 10% of our units are held back from us until we reach certain thresholds of retail leasing as well, right? So again, storefronts will be in. We're incentivized to complete leasing. We'd be incentivized regardless because it's our financial wherewithal that's involved in this as well. One of the lessons learned, and I've said this again for a long time as well, is that it's very difficult to prescribe commercial use when you're talking 3 or 4 years in advance. That's one thing that's burned us, right? Like I said, we've got a 9,000 square foot brewery that we thought we had that's now not. It's very oddly shaped and designed because we designed a brewery, and now we're trying to figure out how to backfill that, right? So what we've tried to design here is flexible retail that can be adapted for a lot of different uses. Without saying we're going to commit to a 7-Eleven, because once you do that, 7-Eleven knows, well, they have to do a 7-Eleven, so that we have all the leverage, right? So, we want to make sure that this is successful retail. We want to make sure it's attractive retail, and we'll be putting in the storefronts.
Thank you. Let's see, any other speakers before we close the public portion? Any other speakers on the phone or in person? No. All right, seeing none, then we will close the public comment portion of the meeting and brings it back to the commission. So what's the commission's pleasure? We've heard some concerns from some members about, some commissioners about timing, and is this ready? Would another few weeks, into mid-September to get a resubmission reviewed and get items buttoned up be better? Or are people comfortable going ahead as staff has suggested and delegating some of these items to administrative review by staff? I know we have certainly done that on many site plans. I think there's probably a difference of perspective on, how much is wise for us to delegate to staff and what is imperative that we see and that the public sees before that. But I think that's kind of the decision point we're at this point. I had a question about the stormwater, and I appreciate them walking me through that. I feel a little bit better now that the VC requires that they hit that. I think they'll demonstrate that they hit that. The architecture, I think, is a little more significant because it's somewhat, inherently architecture is subjective, and the recommendations that they're looking to do, there could be some benefit to taking another look at that. But I'm curious to hear what the rest of the commission has to say on that point.
I did want to ask one question of clarification, just based on the comment we get on the crosswalk. He was suggesting that it should be on the east side, not the west side.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have a picture of the crosswalk? I'd just like to...
Sure. Can you go back to the slide that had the striping? So we talked about the location of that crosswalk.
Yeah,
a
I remember
lot
talking about it last.
through special exception.
Yeah.
It's just some painting.
Yeah, so I think keeps going up. So here, so if I'm up, yeah, that one. So if I'm understanding correctly, so the crosswalk, as we can see, is located where you have the nubs, right? So we've made that crosswalk shorter than it is today. I think substantially shorter. I want to say it's like 10 or 12 feet shorter than it is today by creating those bump outs, which also serves as traffic calming for the neighborhood as well. The comment that we had received was, I'm not sure about the east to west orientation, but moving it north so that it aligns with the north portion of the Ellison Street sidewalk on the east. And that presented a whole host of problems from a transportation and traffic thing. I guess I don't want to say intuitively, but like most obviously is that if you move that sidewalk or move that crosswalk to the north, traffic that is making the right-hand turn off of Ellison to go north on west is looking left at traffic coming that direction, whereas you have pedestrians coming to your right. So you're more liable to make that turn out, whereas this orientation, that's not the case. There were other concerns as well. Effectively, there's ADA access issues where you cannot move that north The city was not allowed to, so you would have to have two crosswalks. So there were all kind of implications associated with it that we studied, and I apologize for my lack of being able to be more specific with that, because we did talk about this one a lot in terms of where that sidewalk should go during the special exception process.
And no worries, I just thought it would be good to bring it up since he had made that.
Yeah, no, and
I thought the location was good because it kind of splits the difference between the two pieces of Ellison, because we have.
yeah, and just to be clear to everyone's point, we're redoing that crosswalk, and we're redoing the north-south crosswalk on the other side of Ellison Street too. So both of those crosswalks will be redone.
Could that be on the, what I'm saying is the Route 7 side, is that the north side, closer to Broad Street?
So but the Broad Street crosswalks will also be redone if you scroll up,
Yeah,
Jack.
It's from Ellison, you're going on Ellison, and I think the crosswalk should be closer to Broad Street than 7, because no one uses the other end, no one.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So we are redoing yeah, if you go down that site, the illustrative site plan, right? You've got the north, south, east, west on Broad and West Street, right? So essentially now you're going to have the perfect square, because Phase 1 did the other two legs. This will now do these two legs. And then we're going to have the two legs there at Ellison and West Street on, crossing West Street there, yeah, and then over on the other side as well. And my point before was moving the east-west connection to the north created all kinds of safety issues. It was adjudicated this was the best location for that.
Route 7, you're saying.
Correct, moving that north to closer to
No one
Route 7.
uses the south side, kids walk across, because it's like an extension of Ellison. No one uses the other crosswalk. Even in town.
Well, I guess the hope would be that by redoing the streetscapes here, one of the issues that we talked about, right, is these sidewalks are very narrow right now. There's all kinds of encroachments. We're effectively doubling the size of the clearances of these sidewalks right now. In addition to shortening that crosswalk, you also have the integration of the Founders Plaza, which we think will bring in a lot of public traffic. So hopefully this, in general, right, everything around this becomes much more walkable. So those crosswalks get used more, so you want to ensure they're in the safest locations. Pedestrian traffic behavior inherently will change by virtue of what we're programming here. And
Definitely be more attractive to walk on that section than cross there.
Yeah, I'm talking
Yeah.
about the one going across West Street, right? Crosswalk across West.
Correct.
Right, no, I think, yeah. I think once it's developed this way, I think it will change. I mean, kids are kids, and who knows what they'll do, but I think it'll, generally it will be more, it would seem to be more logical and attractive to cross at the, at this new crossing compared to what they do today. I think I understand what the speaker is alluding to, but I think, and I think there were some reasons why it had to go here, or why it made more sense. So it's going to be a change from the current conditions today. And I think the majority of pedestrians will choose to do that if they're ultimately trying to go westbound, towards the Bertram Broad or towards the high school and the middle school. I think, and they're coming up from that area. I think they'll tend to use that. It would just seem to be
Just so the crosswalk going across West is closer to 7th Street.
right,
Okay, yeah. Just
Right.
so we know what we're talking about. Okay.
right,
Whatever you do, because it's only like $20 a paint. They could change it any time.
right. But yeah, right. I know. I totally understand that. But there are oftentimes even something simple as a crosswalk can get technical with sight distance requirements and ADA requirements and other such things. But I think what they've shown seems to be the most logical.
That's the thing where there's bump outs, it's going to make it shorter to cross. That's
Right.
Probably going to make people.
Exactly,
more
right,
comfortable.
Go ahead, Ms.
No,
Wilmot.
I just want to bring it up real quick.
I just, I remember that there was a lot of discussion about the location of this crosswalk, and I understand why the speaker is saying that people cross at the northern section, because I'm looking at Google Maps, and there's no sidewalk on Ellison where the crosswalk crosses to. So you're sort of,
On that side of it.
correct. So on Ellison, on the part on Ellison by Falls Green,
And that's why we're redoing the other crosswalk as well. And you're exactly right. That was the contention.
so it's really, I guess maybe it's a question for staff on, maybe this is a missing link.
Correct.
Opportunity. So we could build a sidewalk in that area along Ellison.
It's not worth it.
And then,
People come down the street from the house.
yeah, thank you, sir. But yeah, I think there has been a lot of discussion about the location for this. So,
All right. So again, for the commissioners, we have a decision to make as far as what we want to do here. I mean, I guess if someone wants to make a motion one way or the other, we can kind of see where that falls, or we can kind of discuss it now. See if we can reach a consensus on acting on what we have before us with a bunch of conditions, or waiting to get a revised submission. I'm curious to take the commission's temperature on that.
I am comfortable
Mr.
moving ahead. I do appreciate the commissioner's comments on the outstanding items. I think the motion as suggested with the contingencies that are in there, I think addresses most of those concerns. The architecture, I think, yes, is a subjective thing that we can talk about later. I don't think it would change my vote, so I'm comfortable moving forward with that here. I think the applicant's been very responsive to all the comments and questions we had 2 weeks ago on the parking, on the bus shelters, on the pedestrian safety, and ultimately, I think this is a terrific project. I see the vision for it, I see what we're trying to do here, and I'm very comfortable moving ahead today.
Thank you, Mr. Puentes. Let's see, anybody else want to chime in on this? I think, Ms. Dietz, I think I know how you feel. You expressed it before, but are you still kind of in the same place you were?
Let me ask a couple quick questions.
Sure.
I kind of came into it going, I felt like this list got bigger than during the work session, and that made me uncomfortable because I'd like to see the list shrink. But then I also do feel like some of these things seem kind of squishy in that we probably are okay on runoff and this, that, and the other. And I guess this happens every time. Every time we have administrative stuff, I'm uncomfortable with it because I feel like we should get a complete final site plan. And it just seems like we're not getting that. I mean, the last few have always, it seems like the last couple of years we're getting a lot of these administrative things. It's very shifted sand, so I don't like that. I wish that we could get, like, it's done. We all know what it is. But just let me run through this. So we did the stormwater, just on the architectural thing. So it looks like the remaining issues on that is some streetscape amenities on that corner because it does look like it's kind of a big blank corner. Are you guys, I mean, is that something that's going to change?
Short answer is no, because it's not our property.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you can, actually, the next slide, sorry, not to interrupt, if you want
No, it's all right.
keep going. The next slide, and I do apologize, I think there were a handful of people missing from the last work session where we did talk a little bit more in detail about this, and our architect is here. If you want to hear them more technically discuss how we responded to the AAB's comments, kind of around the facades, we certainly can. But we've added plantings to the front of the building, kind of where you've got the bump out, the roundabout. We've widened that plaza, and again, that dotted line, that's not our property beyond that.
Right. No, and that's what I
Yeah.
thought. So I kind of thought, so the staff is listing that, but my feeling from the work session probably is that you aren't going to do anything beyond that line.
Correct.
And so back to staff, what are you looking for them to do?
I think this was something we flagged where, certainly we work with the private side to install the city streetscape and around a lot of these projects. And so I think as the urban designers for urban design review, what we were looking for is some sort of streetscape element that carries toward that corner. I don't exactly know what that would be. I think they've highlighted a couple of challenges in terms of, what are the pedestrian passageways. I think people are also going to ask, can you see around the corner adequately? So it's not an easy problem to solve. But I think our concern from an urban design perspective is just leaving that much depth of sort of open sidewalk.
Right, because it kind of makes you think of George Mason Square where it has that giant corner that seems so empty and sad.
It makes this perfect spot for the love statue whenever it comes to town. But
Yeah, I guess my feeling is it sounds like that really shouldn't be in here because they don't feel like that they're going to add anything there. So the question is, on the site plan, if we're voting for it, it doesn't seem like you're going to administratively solve that. We're kind of at an impasse there.
I don't think that we have really the power to.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and I think even if we include it here, I'm not sure, it sounds like we're not going to resolve it anyway. So administratively, it just will go away.
Yeah, it's more of
Okay.
a suggestion, I guess.
Yeah.
And to be clear, we have modified that since that comment was
Right.
received, right? So this is new, effectively, in the
Yeah, I knew
2.1
you added
and then in
things
the
to it,
final.
so I'm just wondering
Yeah.
why we have it still in here. Is because we're looking for more than the modification they did?
A lot of it is because we haven't had a full chance to really see what
Okay.
was, done by this 2.1 or a future 3.
All right.
Yeah, and I did feel like B, the widen access, that we had talked about that at the work session, and that there was talk about widen the staircase a little bit. So maybe that's not an issue. And then I guess, so the last thing is the facades. And I know you've made some changes to the facades, but are we really looking for more? Is it another thing where it just hasn't been looked at?
Yes, but luckily, I'm the liaison for the AAB.
Right.
So I know at least what they were looking for when they saw it. A couple of things that they had pointed out was the 6th-story, the very top of the building along Ellison Street, so above the townhouses. They just felt was very monotonous and very flat there. And I can already tell by submission 2.1 and the new elevations here that that has been reworked right there.
Right.
If I could just add to that, also as a liaison, I
Yeah.
was at that same meeting.
Right.
And yes, I think in my lay opinion, the changes that have been submitted kind of correspond to the concerns that the AAB members had, both in the back to adjust the elevation of that, and then on the front to add some additional articulation to break up the facade of the building. So
Okay.
I believe those were.
Well, I guess, if that's where we stand on this, it sounds like the really big remaining thing is that corner, maybe having some kind of art on there. Maybe that's on us. But I also feel like we might need a lot of room on that corner because people have to cross.
That's been one of our,
Yeah.
one of our reasons. That's a very busy corner.
Right, I
Right.
see people standing there, and sometimes there's several people and people with bikes standing there to cross,
Exactly.
so. Okay, well, I think I'm good with going forward because I was mostly concerned about the architectural stuff and I wanted to run through it real quick. And I feel like the transportation, there are a few things that kind of stick for me, but that is one thing where I think the staff has the ability to really push on that. So it's okay if that's administrative.
Okay, appreciate that. Commissioner Stevens, go ahead.
Yeah, just one quick comment. I kind of hope in the future that the city can kind of work out the timing with the applicants so that there's, enough time to go ahead and resolve the open issues. It sounds like it kind of got crunched right now. I mean, that happens, but, we've had a good chance to talk through these issues, so I think that's helpful. But better yet, to provide enough time to kind of fully resolve the issues. Thanks.
Okay. Any other commissioners have any other comments? I mean, I would just align myself, I think, with Commissioner Puentes and Stevens and Teets, that I think that initially I was skeptical. The list was long, and a few things seemed like red flags to me, but we did talk them through tonight, and it seems like they're not as daunting or as significant as I feared they were to delegate to staff. I mean, I agree with Commissioner Teets that, in general, we would like to see a site plan that is substantially complete. Not that this isn't complete, but that doesn't have as many loose ends as this appeared to have. I know staff does their best, and resubmissions come in, and it's there always seems to be a few things that sneak through that don't get addressed, and you're trying to address them, and so I appreciate that. I'm very familiar with that myself, but so in general, we'd like to have something that's substantially complete, knowing that there'll be some minor tweaks that always do occur in the at the staff level and then during construction. But with all that said, I think having talked through these issues, I'm comfortable moving forward. I think we'll need to perhaps, if we get a motion that has enough support, to revise some of this suggestions based on our conversation just tonight. Some of these things maybe don't need to be included, or we should revise how it's phrased, but I'm comfortable moving forward. Anybody else? Anything else to add? If not, then I guess we'd look for someone to attempt to make a motion.
There's 2 motions.
I'm sorry, right, and yes, it's the site plan, which we spent most of the time talking on, and then there's the motion for the subdivision. There'll have to be 2 separate votes on that, because they're 2 separate items. I think the subdivision's a little less controversial, or,
And I have a recommended addition when we get to that point.
on the subdivision, okay. So, and we can certainly debate that. We didn't spend too much time on it, but, so if someone's ready to, I guess we'll do I guess we'll do the site plan first. Or it doesn't matter, I suppose. We can do either one. So if someone wants to start us off one way or the other, we can proceed.
Well, I can do the subdivision, but what did you want to add to that?
If you want, I can read it now, or...
Or do you want to do the subdivision and just add it to it since you have the addition?
Well, I think it goes better with the site plan. But,
Oh, does it? Oh, okay.
This has to do with the sidewalk improvement, BC.
Oh,
Okay, yeah, that should go with the site plan then.
okay.
So
No, I'll make the motion for subdivision, then we can do the site plan.
go ahead, Commissioner Dietz.
Okay. Okay. Whereas the requested subdivision for consolidation of subject parcels in the development meets all applicable requirements of the city's subdivision and zoning ordinance, I move that the planning commission approve subdivision application number 2020-0877 for Founder's Row 2 to consolidate two lots into one lot at 1001 and 1003 West Broad Street, real property code numbers 52-102-065 and 52-102-060, known as the Founder's Row 2 application by Mill Creek Residential Trust LLC.
Thank you. That's a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Any discussion on the motion for the subdivision? Hearing no discussion on that, I'll get a roll call vote, please, Mr. Trainer.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Puentes,
Yes?
Ms. Comat,
Yes.
Mr. Hyra,
Yes.
Mr. Krasner.
Yes. Okay, that motion carries unanimously for those present. So the subdivision application is approved. So now that takes us back to the site plan application. Does anyone feel so bold as to make a motion on the site plan? Mr.
Yeah.
Fuentes, go ahead.
And I'm going to, for now, leave out under number 3A, about the corner, and we could do that with a friendly amendment. Or
Sure. Well, go ahead. As you make it, you can make that revision yourself as you go.
Whereas the Planning Commission finds approval of the site plan and related waivers and modifications is consistent with the special exception and conceptual development plan approved by the City of Falls Church City Council on March 28, 2022. And whereas the Planning Commission finds approval of the site plan and related waivers and modifications meets all applicable requirements of Division 7 Site Plans, Chapter 48-1137. And whereas the requested waivers and modifications would not substantially be detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the community. And now therefore, I move that the Planning Commission approve site plan application number 2020-0877 to permit the construction of a mixed-use development, including the following waivers. 1, a waiver of the 100-foot minimum distance of a commercial entrance or exit from an R district, Section 48-938D of the City Code. 2, a waiver requested to reduce the buffer density to that shown on the plan, Section 48-1183 City Code. And 3, a waiver requested for a parking reduction of 25%, Section 48-970 City Code, contingent upon the applicant resubmitting an updated final site plan to be reviewed administratively and approved by the planning director that addresses staff comments on the topics of 1, voluntary concessions. Confirm that the voluntary concessions offered and accepted as part of the special exception approval are fully included, including A, VC 10V, confirmation of 20% reduction in stormwater runoff. 2, transportation engineering, develop or provide requested information on several key transportation and pedestrian safety features, such as A, acceptance of signal plan submittal for West Broad Street and Southwest Street, B, acceptance of crosswalk signage plan for Southwest Street and Ellison Street, C, acceptance of sidewalk along West Broad Street to ensure that cross slopes in the building and pedestrian zones do not 2% cross slope. D, develop safety measures at garage exits to protect crossing pedestrians. E, acceptance of WMATA approval of bus stop location. F, refinement of bike share station placement and required safety measures. 3, Architecture and site design, further refinement of building architecture and site features including A, refine, widen access to West Street Plaza from same corner, actually strike that. Let's just go architecture and site design, A, refine West Ellison Street and portions of the West Broad Street facades as outlined by Architectural Advisory Board. And 4, Development Review Committee, DRC comments, all remaining staff comments on the second site plan submission should be adequately addressed in subsequent submission.
Thank you, Commissioner Puentes. That's the motion on the floor. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
We have a second from Ms. Teets. Okay, discussion, just, something I just picked up on. Should 2C, friendly amendment, should that be pedestrian zones do not exceed
Yes.
2% cross slope? Okay,
Yes, that's correct.
all right,
Typo.
that's fine. Does the maker of the motion
Accept.
accept that? Does the seconder
Accept.
that? Good.
I have a friendly amendment.
Okay, Commissioner Stevens, go ahead.
Shall I go ahead? I'd like to propose adding a fourth whereas. This would be right before the now therefore I move that. Whereas the commission requests that the city make use of some of the sidewalk improvement VC to improve the city-owned sidewalk from this project to the WNOD to permit safe use by bicyclists and pedestrians.
Accept.
Accept.
Okay, so that has been added.
Should, just one other thing, I mean, we talked about the sidewalk space on the corner. It seemed like staff wanted some enhancements. The applicant said that they don't own it, so they're not going to do anything, but we could use some of the money for that, so we could add for sidewalk improvements at the corner.
That's why I used to make use of some of the sidewalk so that there's, some that could be used for
Okay.
that as well.
All right, fine.
Okay, all right, so that, everyone's okay with how that's, so just so we're clear, on number 3, as was printed, the motion now deletes A and B, right?
Correct.
Right, so A and B are deleted, and what was previously 3C is now 3A. Staff and everyone else following along with that, those changes? Yes, I see a thumbs up from Mr. Stoddard. Okay. So we have the motion, it's been revised, and it's been, the makers and the seconder has accepted all the changes. Is there any further discussion on that motion? I am not seeing any, so we will go to a roll call vote.
Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Puentes?
Yes.
Ms. Comont?
Yes.
Mr. Hyra?
Yes.
Mr. Krasner?
Yes. Okay, well then that also passes unanimously. Congratulations, Mr. Muffler.
Thank you all so much for all of your help throughout this process.
Thank
So,
you
really
and your
appreciate it.
team for sticking with this process over the years, and we look forward to part 2, and we also look forward to part 1.
We're not going
Opening up.
anywhere. All right, thank you all. Have a great night.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, hopefully that was the heavier lift tonight, but you never know, because that's how we roll. So, item 6B, and this is also a action item. I will read the item officially here. 1 second here. Here we go. This is an action requested for the Planning Commission on, we're just making a recommendation, right? This is a recommendation to
Correct, your action is a recommendation. Yep.
recommendation to the
To the Recreation.
to the
Parks
Recreation and
Advisory Board.
Advisory, right, so, all right, this is I guess it's a public hearing, right? It's an action item.
You can certainly open up to public comment,
All right,
yes.
well, it's open to the public if anyone's here, on a recommendation from the Planning Commission on the Fellows Property Park Master Plan. So, Mr. Stoddard, can you introduce the item for us?
Sure, I'm happy to. So this item was before you as a work session at your last meeting, and now it's coming back to you for final action. Just to repeat what the chair has already said, the item before you is a recommendation on a draft master plan that's been referred out by the Recreation and Parks Advisory Board. They've been working on it for a number of months. They've sent it out to boards and commissions for feedback, and taking action on it tonight. We'll get your comments back to them by the requested deadline, which was near the end of this month. There have been no changes in the materials since this was before you for work session. What has changed in the staff report is that a draft motion has been drafted. It's a mix of things of staff's recommendations on the master plan, as well as things that were raised by commissioners at the work session. I'm happy to leave it there. I'm also happy to go in more depth or take questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stoddard. I was not at the work session. I did review the meeting. It sounds like there was a good discussion on some of the concepts, and I know this is not a complete plan as far as we're used to seeing like a physical plan for the park. They're not quite at that stage yet, but I know that was discussed, and these are more guiding principles and recommendations as they develop that. I guess at this point, staff's prepared a draft motion that lists 8 recommendations to provide to the park board. I guess at this point, I'd look to hear if anyone has any comments on that or questions for staff or things they'd like to add to that list. Any comments on the master plan?
I just have a
ahead.
question about the process. So the motion is to recommend that the Rec and Parks Board finalize the master plan, but before, I think number 7, before referring the park design to a sole source award or as part of a competitive selection process, a sketch plan should be developed so the community can consider how the various park elements will be organized and the site developed. So that means that there will be a future opportunity for the public to review an actual plan for the park and provide feedback?
Yeah, so some of this is just making sure there's clarity on the approach. So the city, I think, once this plan goes on the books, with the exception of Fort Taylor Park, all the parks in the city will have master plans. The master plans are generally of the form that the Rec and Parks Board has provided in terms of a list of goals, strategies, aspirations, but it typically doesn't include a plan for physical development of the property. And so how that's been handled in recent projects is as part of developing the plan itself. And I think the sort of urban designer in me or the planner in me suggests that you probably get a lot of value out of showing some sort of sketch plan or a couple of sketch plans to the community, let them play around with some elements, move some things around before you really start to spend big dollars on stormwater engineering and things of the like. So that's what's included in the recommendation, is that there be some sketch plan prepared before the city begins to incur the heavy expenses of site engineering and design.
That'd be like a charrette?
There are a lot of different ways you could do it. That would certainly be one. And it
Early-
doesn't, a charrette doesn't, the idea of sort of everyone getting around the table and talking about it, right? It doesn't have to be 3 days of people staying in sleeping bags.
Well, and I think this park in particular, because it's not,
It's minimal.
yeah.
Right, well, early on, they actually did have a couple sketches, and they were really just like hand-drawn sketches of, leave the trees here, there could be a little trail
A
here.
path, yeah.
And so they had those in those public meetings. There were lots of public meetings early on. So they did have those sketches, but yeah, typically this is almost like the way our area plans are. So this is a visionary document, what they're looking for. So when they actually get funds to actually make the improvements, then they're going to have to go through an actual formal process of designing it, site plan.
Including a
public
site
meetings.
plan, right, that comes
Yeah.
back- that comes
So
back to us,
You
yeah.
kind of think of these, it's kind of like an area plan for a park.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks for the clarification.
Right. So that's an important note that for the public's benefit or anyone listening or reading this or watching this later is that when they're ready to actually implement this, they would need to prepare a site plan with all the details that would go through the public process and come before us, just like other site plans do for city projects. So that's important to note that, right, this is more of a bigger picture, higher level document, and it's not meant to provide, you know, the playground's going to go here, there's going to be 3 swings, there's going to be this or that, a trail or not. So,
Big Chimneys is a good example of that. There was a master plan for that, and then later on, they had funds come in, mostly from West Broad, actually, of the voluntary concession. And then they came back and started showing what they were actually going to do and how they're going to deal with the water retention issue they had there, so.
okay. Let's see. One thing, I mean, just to, not to nitpick some of the wording here, but number 4, about the stone wall. I mean, I don't know. I don't know exactly. I don't want to do wordsmithing too much in real time, but, you know, I like stone walls. They can be calming and enticing, but it just seemed that was a little flowery. But I know it's not that important to, you know, ultimately. But I mean, we like the wall. I think we're saying we want to keep it. You know, it could be calming. I mean, it evokes, you know, maybe New England or something. I don't know. But I thought that was, I don't know. It was that struck me as a bit over the top, but maybe it's a really great wall.
We don't want to stonewall this process, though. Right?
Yeah. So, but anyhow, but otherwise, I wasn't here for the discussion, so I'm just poking fun. But I don't have any problem with any of the items in the list itself. So I guess, you know, but if there are other things people want to add, I guess this would be the time to do it. Before we do that too, I know we still have a member of the public here. Anyone wanting to speak on this item before we would move to a motion on it? Anyone from the public here in person or virtually looking to sign up or wants to speak on this? You're here. Go for it. Sure. Oh, yeah. Ultimately, when it's time to build something there, yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Very good. Thank you. Okay. So then back to the commission on this item. Is anyone ready to make a motion, or do we want to tweak this list of 8 items anymore, or we feel pretty good about it?
I think I was the one that mentioned the stone wall in the August 3rd discussion. I didn't describe it as calming and enticing, though I think it is. It provides character. I mean, I noted the wording as well, so
Yeah.
I don't have any strong feelings on wordsmithing it, but yeah, I just felt like it was it offers a sense of history and character.
It does. It's neat, and I think there's a house right near there that has a stone wall that's kind of a little bit unusual for the city, and it's kind of nice. So no, I totally agree. We should keep it as long as it's, you know, sound structurally. But yeah, it's fine. I'm just poking fun. I don't know if Mr. Stoddard or Mr. Trainer wrote that, but I like it. Sometimes, you know, planners have to think, you know, think big. All right, so if we're ready to someone to make a motion on this, and we can continue to tweak it after someone makes a motion, if they want to change any of the language after they read it, maybe read it out. If something strikes somebody. Does anyone feel so bold on this? Anybody?
I can do it. I was going to defer to
Alright.
Ms. Teets, but I'm happy to.
I mean, I could do it. It's just a long one.
I'll do it. I'll do it. I'm happy to. You can second.
All right, Ms. Coleman, go ahead.
Okay, whereas over the last year, the Advisory Board of Recreation and Parks has been developing the draft master plan for the Fellows property, and on July 13th, 2022, the board referred the draft plan to the Planning Commission for comment, and whereas prior to the city's acquisition of the property in 2019, the Planning Commission reviewed the proposed acquisition as required by the city charter and recommended that council acquire the property, and also recommended the property's use change in the comprehensive plan to be designated as open space and/or schools, and, there's a typo there, but whereas, you need an H.
Yeah.
The park purposes and park elements in the draft plan are inclusive and contain several elements important to good park design. Now therefore I move that the Planning Commission recommend the Board of Recreation and Parks finalize the draft master plan for the Fellows property and consider the following recommendations. 1. An emphasis on the natural environment and wildlife habitat should be kept on the site regardless of use as park space or expansion of the Oak Street Elementary School campus. I do have a question about that one. I'm sorry, can I pause?
Sure.
If it's going to be used as, for expansion of the Oak Street Elementary School campus, I guess we're saying we should not put a building there? Because I'm not sure how it can, we keep an emphasis on the natural environment and wildlife habitat when there's a school building there.
So I think, part of the idea of sort of expanding the campus, does it become an outdoor classroom? Does it become a park, sort of a neighborhood park? I think what you would be saying is that regardless of whether it's, considered to be sort of a public park open to everyone at all hours of the day, or whether it becomes some sort of, school campus during school hours, you would still want to see, as written, you'd want to see a heavy use of natural environment and wildlife habitat. You wouldn't want to see it turn into like concrete and tetherball courts.
Okay.
Why don't we just say keep as many trees as possible? Because that's what we're referring to, right? I mean, what environment is there?
Right, it's the
other
mature
than grass
trees.
and trees?
It's the mature trees.
So
You're right, I agree, Mr.
It's
Harris,
like,
yeah.
that's the wildlife habitat are the tree, or is the trees.
So we could say an emphasis on tree preservation?
Yeah, just get more specific, maybe.
Well, the reason for leaving it, right, the idea of wildlife habitat, it's plantings at all, stories. You've got the undergrowth, the midgrowth, the trees. You've got sources for water, sources for plants to grow, animals to grow young. And so there's, right, it could be something about, earning a wildlife habitat certification or something.
And there's a lot of shrubs on there too,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of animals that live there, like foxes live there, and because there are shrubs and trees that are down that cause, that are habitats, so.
Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe I should just
All right, just
continue.
leave it.
Okay. Two, urban agriculture should be encouraged on the site, such as edible gardens. 3, in keeping with the site's preservation as a green play space, plastic playground equipment should be discouraged. 4, the stone wall along South Oak Street offers a calming and enticing aesthetic that should be maintained. 5, sidewalks, street trees, and crosswalks should be included as part of the park design, and budgeting for such elements should be included in the project budget. 6, protected street crossings across South Oak Street between Oak Street Elementary and the Fellows property site should be emphasized as part of the final master plan design. 7, before referring the park design to a sole source award or as part of a competitive selection process, a sketch plan for the park should be developed so that the community can consider how the various park elements will be organized and the site developed. 8, the scale of the proposed improvements would trigger a requirement for a site plan. The time and cost involved in preparing and publicly reviewing a site plan should be included in the project budget and timeline.
Okay, do we have a second on that? Any discussion on this item? Seeing none. I'll just say, yeah, I poked fun at the wall, but I do like it, and I'm fine keeping that in there. And the rest of it, I think, is good. I think we've hit the points that are important for that site. So I think it's been a long time coming. I think there are folks in town wondering what's going to happen there, and hopefully this begins to provide some guidance for the future of that property. Okay, roll call vote, please. Mr. Trainer.
Ms. Dietz?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Puentes?
Yes.
Ms. Comont?
Yes.
Mr. Hyra?
Yes.
Mr. Krasner?
Yes. Okay, then that passes 6-0, and good luck to the Park Advisory Board. Okay, so now moving right along, we have some minutes. I guess some that weren't able to be dealt with, or at least the July minutes weren't able to be acted on last time because we didn't have a quorum in person. Just as an aside on that point, I know there was some email traffic about, I guess, other boards and commissions coming back in person and in the fall, and even though we're already doing that, but just what that means as far as like remote participation. And yeah, we need, in order to have a meeting where we can act on things, we need a quorum physically assembled. People can still participate remotely beyond the 4 if you're one of the 3. That there are rules for that, and we've already adopted that, right, Mr. Stoddard? not to get off on a tangent here, we already did that a couple of years ago, right, as part of our bylaws?
Correct. That's included in your rules of procedure, and we'll, just so everyone's familiar with them, we'll include them in your packet for your next meeting. And the reason for doing that is one, exactly as you said, sort of you have to have a quorum physically present in order to enable remote participation. The other thing is that I think you're limited to some number of remote participations in any given
Per
calendar
year, right, there's some,
So
and
I
that
wanna
comes from
make sure
state
everybody
code,
knows
I
that.
think, right?
Yep.
25, is it 25%? Mr. Stevens could be right, it's something like
I'll double check
that.
the number.
So, good thing, Mr. Hyra, you've changed your class schedule. That's good.
I'm good.
Good,
I will be here,
excellent.
remote, and I won't be late.
Good. Okay, so on the July 20th minutes then, any edits or revisions on those minutes? Anybody?
Move to adopt the July 20th minutes.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? If not, then a roll call vote.
Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Puentes?
Abstain.
Ms. Comont?
Yes.
Mr. Hyra?
Yes.
Mr. Krasner?
Yes. Okay, that passes with one abstention. Okay, then the next set of minutes from August the 3rd, which we were just talking about. For those who were here and participated, any edits or revisions to those minutes? Anybody? Anybody?
I move that we approve the minutes of August 3rd, 2022.
A second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, then we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Abstain?
Mr. Puentes?
Yes.
Ms. Comont?
Yes.
Mr. Hyra?
Yes.
Mr. Krasner?
I'll abstain. So, okay, that passes with 4 votes. All right, that concludes our action items. We have no work session items. Takes us to number 8 for informational items. Starting off with any planning commissioners' reports. August can be quiet sometimes, but sometimes not. So, anyone have anything like to share? Go ahead,
I
Ms.
have one.
Collins.
I went to the Citizens Advisory Committee on Transportation's, their August meeting. They reviewed the Greenway Downs project. That's a pretty large-scale traffic calming project that's happening in the Greenway Downs neighborhood. So there have been some plans presented to the neighborhood. There's been feedback gathered from the neighborhood, and the plans have been adjusted. And so I think they are ready at this point to move to a vote or to have the neighborhood vote on the project. And I think they're figuring out exactly how they're going to do that at this point. They had some issues with previous projects where there were like multiple streets involved and getting enough participation from the neighborhood. So that's still coming. It sounds like it will be 2 years till construction. There's a VDOT review and federal procurement process review. I asked a few questions about the placement of the speed bumps. There are speed bumps on most of the streets that come in from South Washington Street to Seton Lane, with the exception of George Mason Road. So I want to make sure that the neighbors on that street are aware that each street had their own working group, and the working group for George Mason recommended against speed humps, so they were removed. So I just want to make sure that the neighbors are aware that they're the only ones without them at this point. All the other streets will have them. The speed bumps are also placed at differing distances, and it sounds like what staff said is that that's sort of the folks who are willing to host them in front of their houses, which may not be the most effective way to deploy them, but I also understand that it needs to be palatable to the neighborhood. So
It does.
I just wanted to mention that, because that will be a bigger traffic calming project.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, hopefully our transportation folks will take a look at that, and engineering folks, because there is a lot of engineering design that goes into that stuff, and just because one neighbor wants to have it and the other one doesn't want to have it, doesn't always mean that's the right spot. And if speed bumps or humps are in the wrong spot, they can be either not effective, or worse, or they can, really, so that needs to be looked at, I guess, hopefully they'll look at that, because unfortunately, it has to be designed in a way to actually work, because otherwise it's just a lot of money to be spent on something that won't accomplish what people are looking to do. It may wind up, so anyway, hopefully that'll go. I know there's a process that they have, I think this is, right, the city engineering folks, the public works folks are involved in the review of that, right? I would assume.
Yeah, so so it's, the neighborhood traffic calming program is obviously it's a partnership with community providing a lot of their expertise about actually living in the area and knowing how things work and what they want. And then staff providing technical guidance from both the planning shop as well as public works. So specific to speed humps, you're right that there are sort of desired ranges for how far you space these things and how you design them. There are also some areas where you don't want to put them, whether it's coming right out of a turn, or whether it's in front of a stormwater basin. So you're trying to make sure stormwater works, that you don't create some sort of crash hazard. You've got these spacing standards, and then you've got residents who either do or don't want the speed humps. And so when you pull all those things together, you can usually find a location that works.
Okay. And I know there are a lot of, more smarter minds than me who will look at that and figure it out. But, it's something that, there's, like, for the average citizen, sometimes they don't always think about, like, the, some of the technical aspects of installing those kind of measures. And, but yeah.
Yeah, should be a partnership, definitely, with staff's expertise involved. The other thing to note is there's a walking path that will be paved. Right now, it's pretty actively used. It gets very muddy, so I think that will be an improvement, hoping that we can make the paving permeable. So
You mean the one that kind of like cuts across?
The one that cuts across. Yeah, it's about midway down the block across
It's almost like an
those long
alleyway.
streets.
Is that a desire path, I think they called them?
It's actually like a right-of-way. It's about 10 feet wide. I think the plan is to pave about a 5-foot wide section of it.
Is that the one that
Almost like
goes?
an old paper street.
It's it's like a paper
It's a
street.
paper street, and it cuts
yeah.
through all the streets, so that
Yeah.
if you're like on one and you want to get to the other, you don't have to walk out and
Right.
come around. You just cut through the middle.
About a third of the way down, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually really useful.
It is great, yeah.
For anyone who wants to see what it could look like, if you just go south of 29, Fairfax County has actually treated their paper street
that's
with
good to know.
paved walking and crosswalks and proper signage, so you can actually get a look at, I think, what's a very good model. Greenway Downs, right, it's built by the same developer on both sides of 29.
Yep.
So you've got the same widths to work
yeah.
with.
And crosswalks are proposed for the path where it crosses each of the
Which
streets.
would actually make it more useful and people could really see it.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of one of those things where
Pretty hidden, yeah.
some people don't know about it that actually live in the neighborhood, and I point it out to them, and they're like, oh, okay. But
The only other thing I wanted to mention from CACT is that they have prepared a pretty extensive memo for the student studio that will be convened to look at the bike master plan. It's a lot of really great background on bicycling in the city of Falls Church. So worth taking a look at their agenda from their August meeting if you're curious about that. That's it.
yeah, I had a quick report. I attended the Great Streets walking tour that we had on Park Avenue, and what I thought was interesting is the comments I heard most from people was a lot of fears about the farmers market, where it would be, if we would lose parking if we moved it, if it would be too long, like we'd go too far down Park. Someone suggested to me, and I thought it was interesting, that we have it along the front like we do, then have it down the side and down, and then close just the part of Park in front of the City Hall, and then come up Little Falls and actually have it like a square. And then we get the parking back on the side where the police station entrance is, and we don't lose too much street parking. Anyway, so that was one concept I thought was kind of cool. And then the other thing, people are concerned about the bump outs at Maple and Park, that they think they may be a little too large. Because, I mean, we do need to slow down people. There are people who run those stop signs all the time, which is shocking to me, because there's everyone's walking around there, and you see people run the stop signs all the time. And this would make it at least slow down the turners.
Yeah.
But it may be, I was looking at them the other day, because, if you go to Northside Social, you can, the biggest bump out is on that corner, and I do wonder if it's a little bit out there. But generally, people seemed okay about it. I think they're mostly concerned about loss of parking, which, but there's also a concern that there's not enough being done for bikes. So anyway, but I thought it was a good walking tour. It was a big group of people. It was hard to handle, and I know and a lot of people were talking while other people were talking, but I mean, I think there was a lot of value in it, and I'm still getting people coming up to me a couple weeks later asking me stuff about it, like that we're on that tour and just didn't get a chance to ask questions. So I really do like it when we get outside and walk like that.
I think it's a lot easier to see what's actually going on the street and where could you fit things in. And this idea of, well, no one's using the piece of Little Falls. What if we just send the farmer's market that way, right? It's sort of the creativity comes out when you're actually on site and looking at it versus, staring at lines on a piece of paper.
But I like that concept that it could be more of a circular, because right now we do have people that are kind of off the sidewalk on Park that aren't vendors. They're kind of like, but I don't see anyone walking down there very much unless they park over on that side. And so if it was something that was more of a circle, it actually might be better traffic for everyone. Because I often don't get to the vendors all the way down where the community center is. So if I'm there, because, anyway, it was a concept that it was more of a something that was continuous, that people would more likely walk the whole thing. So anyway, I thought it was a good tour, and I really appreciate staff's time on that.
Very good, agreed. Go ahead, Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, speaking of bicycling, I'm just about done with this book. It's called Cycling for Sustainable Cities, and it's by Ralph Bueller, who Mr. Stoddard will no doubt be very familiar with. He's teaching the studio class this fall at Boston, so I highly recommend this book. It's very well researched and peer-reviewed articles, so very, very authentic. The other one that I finished a couple of weeks ago is about zoning, and who would have thought that you could read a book on zoning that would actually, you could characterize as being well written, but it's Arbitrary Lines, and it's by Nolan Gray. And it's selling quite well right now, but recommend it as a very thought-provoking book. He even recommends getting rid of zoning. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens, for the good summer reading list. There's still a few weeks of summer left, so get at it. All right, anybody else? If not, then I guess Director's Report. Mr. Stoddard.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. There's no written report in your packet, but I thought I might use some time to do a look ahead on agenda items that are coming up. Actually, Mr. Trainer, are you able to pull up the actually linked agenda, since that has the look ahead? So this is one I specifically wanted to flag for you. So message heard from a couple weeks ago, we are trying to do a better job of filling these, keeping this table complete with not only what's coming up on your agenda, but also what's coming up on the council's agenda. And in this case, I'm glad we did. I'm always glad we do. On the council schedule, well, actually, in your own schedule, on September 7th, you'll see that you all are scheduled to take final action on an amendment to the Founders Row VCs. So this was before council for consideration at their most recent meeting, and they did refer this VC change out to both Planning Commission as well as EDA, and they're scheduled to take final action on it in September. So I just wanted to briefly introduce you. It's the motivating change to the VC is to amend the minimum number of theater seats. So when they had previously amended their VCs, they had committed to a minimum number of theater seats of 750 theater seats. And now with their new vendor, they're proposing a new minimum of 550 theater seats. So that's closer in line to what they had one iteration back. When they were working with a different operator, and now that they've got their new operator on board, they're sort of back to where they were before with sort of a minimum of, they expect to have about 600 seats, but they're asking for a minimum commitment of 550. The other thing they're doing now that they've got this new theater operator is that the theater operator typically has some sort of arcade space inside the theater. That's currently on the arcade and amusements are on the prohibited list of uses in their VCs. So they're asking to allow for arcades as an allowable accessory use, not as a principal use, but as an allowable accessory use. And then in exchange for this, in exchange for the relaxations, what they're proposing is an increased hold on the residential COs, and that 36, the final 36 residential COs would be held until a theater lease was executed and shared with the city. So there is a fuller staff report in the council's packet, obviously. But I did want to flag that since that's coming to you for your action at your next meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stoddard.
Relatedly, although it's not before you for action, the council has referred out to the EDA an amendment to the Economic Development Agreement. You may remember that there was previously an Economic Development Agreement in place for this project. It expired due to time when it wasn't acted on. And so the applicant is reinitiating that with some adjusted terms.
Okay. Thank you. All right, well, that almost wraps things up. We had some correspondence related to a picnic, Monday, September 19th, Board of Commission Appreciation Picnic, 6 p.m., Cherry Hill Park. I think they've done that in the past, or maybe there was like a COVID pause for that last couple of years, but that sounds nice. I guess you have to do a lot of noticing if you have all boards and commissions assembled together at the same time. Some serious notice requirements, huh, Mr.
The
Stoddard?
board gets very busy, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Say
The
one-
noticing board will be full.
It's like the mega public meeting of all public meetings if we all assemble at the same time in the same place.
You have to reserve 3 members of all boards and commissions in case there's.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
That is separate
A
security.
few people have to hang out in the bunker under City Hall, just in case, like at the State of the Union, right? So that sounds like a nice idea. So if the weather's good, check it out. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the agenda. If there's nothing else anyone has to add, we will call the meeting adjourned as of 9:16.